In today's lesson, we're going to be covering how to set up your physical workstation as well as record both audio and MIDI information into FL Studio. So please note that I receive no financial compensation by reviewing the equipment that I mentioned. I only review it because it's the equipment that I own and can review. So as a result, if you're having trouble with a different piece that I don't include, your best bet is to go to the equipment's website and look at its user manual. So with all of that being said, let's get into it. Pretty obviously, the first piece of equipment necessary for using FL Studio is your computer. So while you can use any computer, typically the better the computer's CPU, and again that's the central processing unit, the easier it is to run FL Studio. Most of us, however, are stuck with the computer we have. In almost every case, this is fine. I'm currently using a 4.5-year-old Mac, and it works like a charm. So when it comes to interacting with FL Studio, the most basic requirements are a typing keyboard and a mouse. By using the typing keyboard to piano button, right here, then you're going to be able to use your computer's keyboard as a kind of MIDI input. But if you're like me and you enjoy the feel of piano keys and prefer using your computer's keyboard for shortcuts, then it's definitely best to get your hands on some kind of MIDI controller. So for producers who are just starting out, I would recommend the Akai MPK MK2. I recommend this MIDI because I bought it a year ago and it's still going strong today. The keyboard's small, it's light, it still offers all the functionality that you could want. You have your knobs right over here, you got your drum pads, and you got your keys, 2 octaves worth, and a whole lot more controls. So this piece of equipment goes for $130 new on Amazon, somewhere around $110 used, but it's gonna last you well beyond the point at which you might want something bigger or more powerful. I currently use underneath my desk an Alesis VI61, which has more keys and allows me to really play piano rather than construct chords and bass lines separately. But again, this isn't a requirement for starting out. If I had been given 61 keys when I was beginning, I wouldn't have known what to do with them. So this little Akai works great. Next, you might want to consider using a microphone. So I play the guitar and I try to sing, so I like having a microphone that's decent at picking up both vocals and instruments. Unfortunately, my room is not great for recording, so I have to fix that in the near future, but this microphone itself is very good. It costs $88 on Sweetwater, and I've had a decent time with it. Sometimes I get a little bit of popping or distortion, but to be honest with you, I think that's the cable, so maybe buy yourself a new USB-C to USB-A, I believe, cable with this. And I would also highly recommend getting yourself a pop filter. It's going to help all of your sound come out better. So this is a must-have if you're going to be recording or audio externally. So moving away from equipment that is used for input, there are 2 pieces I'd recommend for output: studio monitors and good headphones. For the studio monitors, I have a pair of Mika MB42 bookshelf speakers. These are nowhere near top quality, but they definitely get the job done for what we're doing here. In terms of headphones, I use Audio-Technica ATH M20Xs. If you purchase only one kind of item for your song production, it should be a good pair of headphones. While you have other outputs that are important when you're mixing or mastering for referencing the sound coming out of different sources, a good pair of headphones goes a really long way. And luckily, the ones that I have are under $100 for very high quality. So again, with all of this equipment, I'll leave a link in the description below so that you can go check it out. Let's move on to actually using the equipment. I can only demonstrate with the equipment that I have, so my Akai, my Mac, my USB mic. I apologize if your equipment isn't the same, but that being said, most of what I'm saying applies to most other audio devices, especially for a Mac. So be sure to give this a watch for general understanding. In terms of setting up our MIDI, I own USB-capable MIDI controllers. This means that my MIDI devices can connect directly to my computer using a USB cable. So once I plug in my MIDI, FL Studio automatically recognizes the device and connects to it. In order to see that my MIDI is functioning correctly, I can press a key and look here in the top left dialog box. When this lights up orange, I can see that the computer is receiving my MIDI signal and everything is properly connected. Sometimes to ensure that an external piece of equipment works with your computer, you have to change FL Studio's input settings and/or install a driver. So a driver is essentially a piece of software that links your computer and your controller. Whether or not you need one can be determined by going to your equipment's website and looking up whether or not a driver needs to be installed for it to work with your computer or your DAW. But within FL Studio, it's always a good idea to make sure that your MIDI options are optimized. We can reach this by using an F10 shortcut and going to the MIDI tab. Here, we can see any MIDI controllers that can be used as a source of input for FL Studio. We're going to want to make sure, clicked out there, we're going to want to make sure that when we're on our MIDI controller, we enable it with this green enable button. Further, we're going to want to double check here that whatever MIDI controller we're using isn't pre-programmed into FL Studio. If it is, by clicking the proper MIDI controller here, its functionality is going to work a lot better with FL. Drum pads are another type of MIDI, and they act in an incredibly similar way to what we just plugged in. For now, however, we're not going to cover plugging them in because I don't own drum pads, and we're not going to cover putting two inputs into FL Studio because this is beyond the scope of what we need to be doing as a beginner producer. So now we're going to move on to the process of setting up a microphone. Microphones and recording are something that I really struggled with as a beginner, and so I put a lot of time into making sure that I explained the recording process as precisely as possible now and over the next two videos, which will both also cover recording. At the moment, we're just going to set up the mic, but recording's going to come later. As I said in the beginning of this video, I can only perform demonstrations with the equipment that I have, which in this case includes a Mac and a Samsung USB microphone. In the event that you're using a computer that runs Windows, I'll post a link to FL Studio's manual about microphone setup on that operating system, and if your microphone doesn't plug into your computer via USB, follow the second link for non-USB connections to either computer. All of that said, if you are a Mac user with a USB microphone, let's get into it. The first thing that we're going to do is plug in our microphone. Make sure it's plugged in at the source, the microphone, and the computer to a USB port. Then we'll head over to our Mac's Finder here, and we're going to search for the Utilities folder. Once we find it, we'll double click, and then we're going to click on Audio MIDI Setup. If that folder isn't available, you're going to select the Window option and then click on Show Audio Devices. Once we're in here, we're going to go down to the bottom left and click on this little plus sign, and then click Create Aggregate Device. Once we've selected the device that we just made, we have the option to click in whatever we want to add into this aggregate device. So here you can see our microphone and our built-in output. This is what you're going to want to check if you're using it for FL Studio. I can show you here. We've got the same thing going on. The built-in output and the Samsung C01U Pro mic. This is what I use whenever I'm recording because it allows my input to go through the microphone and my output through the speakers. Please note that if you have a newer version of Mac's operating system, you're going to need to go to your security and privacy settings within System Preferences and select the microphone option. From there, grant FL Studio access to the microphone. Now we can return to FL Studio and designate what we want our new aggregate device to be used for. So let's get back into the settings with the F10 shortcut and go to the Audio tab. Under Input and Output, we're going to select the aggregate device that we just made. Now, I can't click this right now because it means that the mic I'm using to talk to you would cut out, but you're going to want to select the device that you just made. When an audio signal enters an input, like a microphone, and then exits an output, like speakers, that signal can be picked up again by that input, the same microphone. When this happens, the input will feed the signal back into the speakers, which goes back into the microphone, and on and on and on until the signal is extremely loud and unpleasant. This is called feedback, and you might have heard of the term before but not been sure what it was. To avoid this, we have to ensure that the output and input don't interact. We do this by either outputting the audio somewhere out of the microphone's range, like sending it to headphones or muting our speakers, or by preventing the microphone from picking up on signals by disconnecting or muting it. So when we're recording, it's best to use a pair of headphones or mute our speakers until recording is done. So make sure that you do one of these things now to ensure that you don't get any feedback, which can be damaging to both your speakers and your ears.